計劃。 自己已經係，即係你已經輸咗呢啲歌已經係自己。所以你話可能會唔會係 employ 咧？我就唔可以 employ 嘅，因為你會遇翻呢件事嗰傷害，你喺公司都未遇到，咁何謂咧？可能你已經 employ 法律單公司，你自己唔有。咁但係你話會 get paid to do 咧，就有啦。你好多唔同事情，我唔係話好 common， 我唔係話一個係好 common 係有呢樣，一張個冇嘅。如果你 get paid 咪得，有可能佢 get paid 咯，同埋可能係你一個大集團，咁可能大集團之下有幾個大公司大嘅一齊咁其實冇乜所謂嘅。咁同埋你呢一份係話要簽一啲同呢啲好重要嘅，你可能只係簽一啲前期嘅嘢，就代表話我哋幾個人要幫呢間公司啊，或者可能係邊個即係類似呢種嘢，唔係一定話向第三者買啲咩好貴嘅貨，點解咧？同埋有其他方法解決㗎，有啲事實上可以解決，可能係保險啊嘛可以解決，即係其他方式可以處理嘅。即係我唔係話好多大學好溝埋，好多人做緊呢個，但係有時你自己做都有嚟嘅。即係你一個人做飯，我應該同大公司簽下，其實老闆叫做就話我哋另一間新開會開間公司，有其他公司嚟變開，咁其實你都唔知可能已經係抵嘅。係啦，你唔可以形容，我唔覺得好大嘅，大家啲大家咁做有個 interest。做啲相關工作，唔係吸收唔到。我以為你做 concept 嗰類。3人俾你哋，仲未？我已經排咗佢。我即係再電話叫下你打出嚟。 第二科啊，呢科就咁要攞幾多科先可以攞到呢張手續嘅？講科通常幾耐到2年閱讀？1年，咁都幾快。
8月考試
，8月考試，考晒5科。
應該係喎，睇下佢有啲有冇睇到。
一炮過，考晒。
應該係喺度。
都幾熱嘅。辛唔辛苦啊 ？part time 讀書。其實我都幾明白 part time 讀書嘅快樂同埋痛苦，因為我除咗個 undergraduate degree 之外，所有嘢都係 part time 讀法。即係我除咗個 LD undergraduate degree 係即係正常中學之後讀嗰個學位之外，跟住我嘅 master， 我嘅 charter 嘅 ComSci 個資格，PCLL account。所有嘢都係 part time 讀 ，PCL 都係 part time 讀，所以都好金啊！最金就係 PCL， 唔係最金其實係 account 嗰時。我讀 account， 但係因為冇 account 底，即係 undergrad 係讀 law 啊嘛，即係唔識計數寫字嗰啲人，讀 account 讀就嘔血，全部嗰啲 financial accounting 嘅 subject 全部都考2次嘅，全部都要會做 financial accounting。最慘啲 corporate finance， 你哋有冇人讀 BC 出身？有讀啦。corporate finance 嗰啲 CAM 嗰啲都唔知咩嘢做，完全唔知講。佢最初有一個老師係啲 academic， 即係佢一味喺上頭計數，完全唔知做咩。上咗一個 semester 乜都唔知，收尾佢轉咗，所以我肥咗，跟住轉咗做另一個 account 咁教。咁我就終於從啲現實嗰個 approach 講啊，教啲人點 IPO 啊，咁就勉強 get 到條緊張卡，咁啊差啲死我。咁但係就即係我 so far 我明白個即係讀 part time 嗰個苦與樂，即係有時都開心嘅，一日頭做啲嘢，又可能夜晚讀書，咁個過程好似體操咁樣嘛，坐喺度睇都係噏嘢啊嘛，咁啊，又如果係同自己學做嗰啲嘢相關，咁有時又幾人多嘅，即係可能你日頭做啲嘢啊，可能聽嗰啲律師唔知噏埋啲咩嘢啊，就空明，咁又唔知噏乜又唔好意思問，咁啊扮明，咁又可能聽完之後，啊原來知道咁，又可以空翻佢，就有一種滿足感。咁所以都開心嘅，話1年可以有張稅咁幾好，再讀落去又得，好似草印花。一路可以讀到 advanced diploma， 我有機會喺 advanced diploma 度都有可能會做教科，但係未知。佢同我講過，可能都係教啲 company 嗰啲嘢，佢同我講過，但係唔知道。所以如果你哋有機會再讀先，可能會再見到你哋中意。我未 sure 啊，我未肯定。佢同我講過嘅。Okay, I think we start the class, right? Before we start the class, so tonight, right, in this evening, lecture 5 it means we already completed 50%. So very efficient, right? Very efficient. So before we start lecture 5, so let's talk about lecture 4. Very briefly, right? Okay. So what we learned in lecture 4. Concept of separate legal entity, right? Or separate legal persons. Somehow the same thing. So I would say that it's probably the most important legal principle in company law, right? Probably the most important one. Why so important? Why this principle is so important? Well, so I told you already. So normally, right? Normally, the most preferred form of business vehicle is company, right? You already learned that there are 3 different kinds of business vehicles: sole proprietor, partnership, and company, right? And company is the most preferred form. Why? Because company enjoy one kind of company limited, right? Enjoy limited liability, right? Limited liability. So it means that when a company incurs liability, so only the company will be sued, but not the members and not the directors, right? Okay. But what's the underlying legal principle that protect the members from incurring liability from outside? And that is the principle of separate legal entity, right? So despite your ownership, no matter you own 1% of the shares of the company, or you own 100%, right? Even you own 100% of the company. So from the operational sense, you and the company is exactly the same. Because you are the only shareholder, right? And you are the only director. So from the management perspective, there are no difference between you and the company. But in law, entirely different. You are two separate legal persons. That's why I'm always saying that the principle of separate legal entity is the most important legal principle in company law. So where does it come from, this principle? The Solomon case, right? Solomon versus Solomon. Yes. Can you tell me some implication from this legal principle? So because of this principle, we know that, right, one of it, the members will not be sued because the liability of the company belongs to the company, not to the members, right? It's one of the implications. So any other implication? Apart from limited liability, any other implications that we derive from the Solomon principle? Can you sign a contract to your own company? Yes. So, can you sign a contract with your own company?
Yes.
Can you use your company to employ yourself?
Yes.
Yes. Right. So this is another implication. Can you sue your own company, even you own your company for 100%? Yes. Can your company sue you? Well, that may not happen, but in theory, is it possible? Yes. Right. Your company can sue you, even you are the only shareholder and you own the company for 100%. Your company can sue you, right? Okay. But the Solomon principle is not invincible, right? It's not invincible. It offers very good protection to the members. But I'm not saying that it works 100%. It works 99%, but not 100%. Because we have another legal principle targeting on the Solomon principle. What is it? Piercing the corporate veil. What is it? What is piercing the corporate veil? What is it?
Exception of the Solomon principle.
Yes, I agree. Right? You can say so. You can say so. But there are some exceptions to the Solomon principle. It means that, right? It means that in certain circumstances, the corporate form will be ignored. And the person behind the company shall be responsible for the liability of the company, but only in some limited circumstances, right? So we call it piercing the corporate, get through it, right? Cut through it, right? Because the form, the company is only a mask in certain circumstances. Can you give me one example? Probably you don't remember all of that. Can you give me one example that the court allowed the plaintiff to pierce the corporate veil? One of the scenarios. Most important one, I told you last time.
Get a loan from the Citibank, and you're wiping up the company.
Well, that may be, right? That may be, but there's one kind of situation that Judge O'Carey ruled that it is not allowed. Do you remember Judge O'Carey? To use the corporate form to avoid existing legal obligations, right? So it means that you are already subject to certain kinds of legal obligation. And then you set up a company with the sole purpose to defeat that restrictions. And the most important case, the Guilford Motor case. So someone signed a contract with his previous employer, and there's a restrictive provision saying that after your resignation, you cannot work in the same industry for 3 years. So that person set up a company to do the same thing, right? And by arguing that there's a company doing the business, and I'm separate from the company, even I own the company, right? And that kind of argument being objected by the court is allowed by the court. It was nonsense because you abuse the corporate form. You use the company to cover up something. But always remember, Pearson and corporate is something really difficult to argue in court, right? And that's the last resort. Normally, the court reject argument like this because to use a company to protect you from risk is something firmly upheld in our legal system, right? It means you can always use it. So only in very exceptional circumstances that you can argue on Pearson and corporate, all right? So there's something we learned in previous lecture. We also learned one more thing at the end.
Promoter.
Yes, promoter, right? Remember, I don't think that promoter is a job. One of the students asked me questions. He said, promoter is a job. I don't think promoter is a job. Promoter refers to a particular legal status. Whenever someone represents a company not yet existed, but you have a company not yet existed to negotiate for a contract or negotiate for anything, and in law you will be deemed, right, deemed or presumed to be a promoter. Right? Okay, so that's what we learned in lecture 4. So let's talk about lecture 5, right? Lecture 5. Okay, lecture 5. In lecture 5, we are going to learn about some very important documents in company audit. In company law, right? Some very important documents. So what are the very important documents here? The article associations and the shareholders agreement, right? So very important documents. The first paragraph. So let's think about what's the most important document in governing company in Hong Kong, of course. We already learned it, the company ordinance, right? So we have two pieces of legislation in governing our companies. So there's the old company ordinance, Cap 32, and the new company ordinance, Cap 62, right? So we have two pieces of legislation. So always remember the dual regime, right? Okay, so the company ordinance is something really important. Why is it so important? Because it's statutory and compulsory, right? Statutory means it's law. It's a law. It also means that it's compulsory. You don't have a choice, right? You don't have rules. You don't have a choice. You have to follow. If the law stated something that you have to do, then you have to do, right? The law is not something for you to like or dislike, but you have to follow, right? What are the rules? Well, apart from the company ordinance, right? Apart from the company ordinance, there are two other very important documents to assist the company ordinance in the administration of companies. So there are articles and shareholders agreements. So the two documents work together with the company ordinance. They work together, right? Work together with the company ordinance. The company ordinance is always here. We don't have a choice, right? We have to learn it. We have to understand the company ordinance. Because it governs everything regarding the corporate activities. But why I'm saying that the two documents work together? Because the company ordinance itself is not enough to run the real operation. The company ordinance only laid down or stipulated the basic principle. But sometimes we need more than that in order to use the corporate to achieve our purpose. So remember that the company itself is neutral, right? The company itself is neutral. It's not being established for company. I mean, not necessarily, right? Not necessarily. The company itself is neutral. So if you start a company, I'm sure that you have something you want to do. So of course we have to understand the company ordinance, right? Because it's the rules, the base, but not enough. Right? sometimes if you want to use your company to achieve something, you need something more than that, right? More than that. So you need to think about the articles and shareholders' agreement. Apart from that, the major difference is that they are not law, right? For the company ordinance, you don't have a choice. You don't have. So once being legislated, what you can do is to understand the meaning, right? Understand all the restrictions in the company ordinance, but you cannot change anything in the company ordinance, right? But for articles and shareholders' agreements, they are capable in a very large extent to reflect the intention of the parties. Because article is something that you can draft your own, right? You can draft your own. And shareholders' agreement is another thing that being drafted by the members, drafted by the shareholders, to reflect their intention regarding the operation of the company. So you can create your own, right? In order to assist the company audit. You got it? So that's the starting point, right? That's the starting point. Of course, that's far from enough to understand the two documents here. Let's take a look at the articles first. Number one, right? Articles of association. We just call it articles, right? We just call it articles. Regarding the legal status of the articles, it is a constitution, right? It's a constitution of the company. So why we call it article? It's constitutions of the company. Why we call it constitutions? So you already learned the Hong Kong legal system, right? So I suppose you understand what's the basic law. You might ask your question, whether basic law is the constitution of Hong Kong. Yes or no? Are you sure? Am I ask the right question or ask the wrong question? Is basic law the constitution of Hong Kong? Is that something being listed? To be accurate, to be precise. So if you look at the textbook, so how do you refer basic law, the legal status of basic law in Hong Kong? Mainly constitution, right? So your answer is yes and no, right? Yes and no. So from the operational sense, correct, right? I agree. So basic law is the constitution of Hong Kong. I suppose you understand what I mean by constitution. The highest law, right? The highest law. And it also stipulated the compositions of the Hong Kong government and the political structure, right? If you take a look at the first few chapters of the basic law, so it stated the government should have executive council, legislative council, judiciary, all this stuff. So that's the same for the articles, right? If you have an article, there are some basic information that you need to be included. For example, like the name of the company, members' liability. What do you mean by that? Members' liability.
Shareholders.
Think about, we have 5 different kinds of companies, right? So if you stated that the liability of the member shall be limited by share, then you are having a company limited by share, right? And then the name of the company, right? You should name the company officially, just like the basic law, right? Basic law officially named Hong Kong as HKSAR, right? You can find, that particular articles. So how about Hong Kong before the Handover? Well, now we understand that, right? Officially, Hong Kong should be adjusted at Hong Kong SAR, right? Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, right? So how about before the Handover? Just Hong Kong. Normally that's correct. Normally that's correct. But if you look at the constitutional documents before the Handover, do you know what are the constitutional documents before the Handover? 2, right? 2 documents. Number one, the royal instructions. Another one, letters patents. 英皇制度皇室法令. Right. So these two pieces of documents created the Hong Kong government before the Handover, right? Before the Handover. So officially, Hong Kong actually being named as a crown colony of the United Kingdom. Right? But normally we just call Hong Kong as Hong Kong, right? But if you look at the constitutional documents before the Handover, Hong Kong shall be named as the crown colony of the United Kingdom, right? But that's before the Handover, right? It doesn't matter nowadays. But anyway, because the Constitution deals with the very fundamental stuff, so including the name, right? So why your company being named as ABC Limited? Because that's being stated in the article, right? So why Hong Kong being named as Hong Kong SAR? Because that's stated in the basic law, right? So why basic law being called constitutions? The Hong Kong SAR is inside the PRC, right? So there is another piece of constitution here, and we have the mini version, right? Only in this version, only in this region. Just a conceptual understanding, right? You ask your teacher in Hong Kong legal system. But anyway, when you draft the articles, remember that they are compulsory information. That must be included. Name of the company, member liabilities. Member liabilities means the nature, the type of your company, right? Company limited by shares, or unlimited company, or limited by guarantee, whatever. And then the capital structures. If you have a company limited by shares, then how many shares being issued, and you have to state in articles. And if your company have shares, you have to identify the different class of shares. Right? You are going to learn about it later in lecture 6. Right? You learn about the different kinds of shares. So all this stuff need to be included, and they are compulsory. Right? They are compulsory. And remember, the constitution of the company, it is the article, is the composition of the company. It is the structure, right? The structure of the company. The structure of the board of directors, the structures regarding different kinds of shares, how the members vote in a meeting, how the directors make decisions in the meeting. So all this stuff needs to be included in the articles. But one thing, right? So bear in mind. So apart from all the information here, right? Apart from all the information here, that they are compulsory, and you have to include all this information in the article, right? But apart from that, you are free to draft your own articles for anything you like, right? Except for this. Right? So you can draft your own articles. So the remaining content are largely discretionary. You can draft your own, right? You have the right to draft your own. So a company is free to set out its own regulation. Right? You can draft your own articles. But do you remember something? Something I told you in lecture 3 when we learned about the incorporation process. Because when you learn about the incorporation process, if you still remember, there are 2 documents you have to submit to the common registry, right? So one is the form, we call it incorporation form. So another one is the article, right? Okay, so now we are talking about the articles again. If you still remember, I told you in lecture 3, normally we don't draft our own articles. So even in theory, you can draft your own article, right? You can do so. Apart from the compulsory information, you can draft anything you like, right? Because no one is going to approve the content of your article. You just submit to the common registry, right? And they keep that in their files, making a microfilm, right, in their computer. But no one is going to approve the content. So say like unlike in mainland, right? Unlike in mainland, when you submit something like the article in the Gusango, right, in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, so they have the right to reject your article. Because they can really, make a comment on it. If that's not suitable, they ask you to do all the amendments. But that's not the case of the common register, right? Because they are not going to review on it in theory, right? In theory. So in theory, you can drop your own, but that's not advisable. Why that's not advisable? Because we have something we call the model article, right? Model article. What I mean by model article? Just from the name, it suggests something, right? What I mean by model? What I mean by model article? What I mean by model answer? You're happy, right? As a student, you always like model answer. Right? Give me the past paper and give me the model answer. And I don't have to attend any lectures at all, right? I can still pass the exam. Right? If you're very skillful students, right? Some of them are very smart. They don't have to attend any lectures at all, right? Just get the past paper, model answer, right? Then they can pass the exam with distinction, with credit. So what I mean by model article? It means sample, right? Sample. So why normally it's not advisable to drop your own articles? Because we have model articles, and we have 3 different sets of model articles. For private company limited by shares, public company limited by shares, and company limited by guarantee. And remember, an article is not required for an unlimited company. Right? Not required. You can drop your article, but not required. Right? Not required. So we have 3 sets of model articles here, right? Okay. So I always advise my clients, if you want to form a company, you should adopt the model article. It's not advisable, even you can, right? But not advisable to drop your own articles. But why? Why it's not advisable to drop your own article? So number one, answer very, very simple, right? I mean, it saves time. As simple as that, right? Because when something is here and you can use it, why don't you use it? So why you waste time to do something that actually you can borrow from the artist? So number one is just convenient, right? But probably that's not the most important reason, at least in law, right? In law, we have some reason to adopt the model articles. Why? Number one, right? Number one. If you drop your own articles, you may have a danger. That will be dangerous. When you drop your own article, that some of the provisions, right, may be contrary to the company ordinance, and you may not be aware of it. Because the company ordinance itself is a very terrible piece of legislation. It has almost 1,000 different provisions, right? And remember, every single provisions in the company ordinance is having a legal status. Because you cannot drop anything against the law. So if you drop your own articles, accidentally, you may make a mistake, which is against the company ordinance. And you know what will happen. If your article is against the law, it means your article is what? Invalid, right? Ineffective, or it doesn't work. So that's not advisable to drop your own articles. Number two, even if a company has all dropped the articles, something you have to be aware, right? You have to be careful. The relevant section of the model article may still apply, unless being clearly excluded or amended by the company. All right? So it means that if something being listed in your article, listed, do not cover the situation. For example, when you drop an article, you have to stipulate some rules regarding voting of the shareholder, right? 你要寫低點樣投票，寫 like the procedure, right? How to vote, when to vote, when to convene a meeting, right? So that's something very important that must be included in the article. But you missed it, right? For whatever reason, you missed that part. So you missed something. And the law assumes that Section 80. Section 80 is saying that the relevant section in the model article still automatically apply to your situation. right? So you have to be very careful, right? You have to be very careful when you drop your own version. Number one, if you drop your own version in a way that contradicts the company ordinance, then that part, right, or that provision will be invalid. It creates confusion. Number two, if something missed it, then the model article still apply to your situation. So why not just adopt the model article, right? And then to amend the part in order to fit your situation. So rather than to drop everything from scratch, right? Rather than to drop everything by your own. Number one, it wastes time. It's not necessary, right? If you have a model, a sample here. So I can tell you that most people adopt the model article. And that's why if you really need to understand the operation of a company, then you have to be familiar with the content of the model article, right? Because that will be the article used by most of the companies, right? Just for your information, before the handover, right? Sorry, before the new company ordinance, yes, before 2014, right? In 2014 March, starting from March of 2014, we have the new company ordinance, Cap 622. So in the old days, 2013 or before, we have the old company ordinance, Cap 32. So in the old days, we also have something like the model articles, but we don't call it the model article. We call it Table A, right? Table A. So if someone mentioned to you something like Table A, it means model article, but in the old company ordinance, right? Some other thing. But the model articles under the new company ordinance were actually being revised and much better to deal with the present situation. Because as I told you before, the old company ordinance, it was legislated before the Second World War, right? A very old piece of legislation, right? Seriously outdated, right? Seriously outdated. So just remember, right? Just remember, if you want to focus on corporate practice, you want to be a company secretary, right? You need to handle corporate affairs. Make sure that you are familiar with the model article. Right? So most companies will adopt model articles just to amend the part not suitable to their particular situation. Right? But in general, normally they use the model article. That will be very rare that someone to drop everything by its own. Right? I'm not saying impossible, but I would say less than 1%. Right? Less than 1% people incorporating companies will drop everything by themselves. Right? Okay, I want to ask you a very interesting question. So I suppose you understand what I mean by model articles and the status of the articles, right? Constitution, remember, composition of the company, internal management of the company, the rules, right? Sell all the rules of the company. Okay, I want to ask you something quite interesting. Changong Company Holding Limited, right? It's a company. And we have a banana here, right? So I'm not asking that Mr. Lee should eat a banana, right? No. But I want to ask you a question. Do you think that Changong, as a company, right? As a company, can sell banana in their office? If you conclude a contract with Changong in buying banana, do you think that this contract can be enforced? So first, right? First, what kind of company is Changong? Not food industry, right? Not even Apple. Apple is not selling Apple, right? Apple is selling iPhone. So don't be misled by the name. Right? Changong has nothing to do with the river. It's a property developer, right? Everyone knows it. Because most of you are paying the mortgage. Right? Obviously, Apple and Apple, they got some打工係還緊錢俾佢。Right. So I want to ask you a question, right? Because you understand that the nature of Changong is property developer, right? Property developer. Or just property, right? Property. So you understand that Changong is a company running the property business. Can you conclude a contract with Changong in buying banana or apple or pineapple or watermelon? Do you think that contract is valid? So what kind of question I want to ask you is also my underlying purpose in asking a question like this. What I want to know. What I want to know. Okay, 想知啲乜嘢? What I actually want to know here, why I ask you the questions, can you buy banana from a property developer? Can you sign a contract with a property developer in buying banana? What I want to know here, of course, not banana itself, right? Not fruit, not watermelon. There's something I want to know from the legal perspective. It's nothing to do with contract. Right? It's nothing to do with contract law. Because you haven't yet studied contract law. So it's nothing to do with contract law. Focus on company law. Right? And focus on article. Think about it. What kind of question I want to ask you? Make a guess. So how many of you think yes? You can sign a contract with a property developer in buying bananas. So forget about all the rules in food and hygiene, like that's not my concern, right? That's not my concern. So think about the operation of the company. Because I'm teaching company law, right? This is a hypothetical situation. It won't happen, but I want you to think about something. Well, I can change the company here. If not Changong, HSBC, can you buy some banana from HSBC? Or can you sign a contract with HSBC and buy some banana? Do you think that you can do something like this? Well, HSBC is a bank, right? So I'm sure that HSBC is not selling banana. And I'm sure that Changong is not selling banana. So actually, what kind of question I want to ask you?
The purpose of the company.
Purpose of the company. Very close. Can you be more precise? Or anyone, yeah, Simon, right? Can anyone have Simon?
Student. Proper student.
So can anyone have Simon? Don't worry, I will not fail because I remember your name. Don't worry. I give you some credit. Right? Oh, you always answer my question. Right?
Okay, great.
Right. So can anyone have Simon? So you are very close to the answer, very close, but not exactly the answer. Very close. You're pointing to the right direction. So actually, what kind of question I want to ask? One thing, right? Do you think that there are any restrictions with the operation of the company? Do you think that, the question I actually want to ask, right, is, do you think that the property company can do something else, which is not related to property? Or do you think that a bank can do something, right? Concluding a contract means engaged in some kind of business, apart from banking. Or can you buy some banana from AIA? Because I want to ask you a question. Do you think that insurance company, do you think an insurance company can do something else other than insurance? So this is the question I want to ask you. Right? Then how do you think? Do you think that a company will be restricted by something to run their business? Well, try to recall the basic concept. You learned it in lecture 1 and lecture 2. When you run a business in Hong Kong, right? As a general rule, no matter under the common law principle or basic law, if you want to run a business in Hong Kong, approval is not required, except for certain restricted industry, right? You want to sell petroleum, you want to sell drugs, right? You want to sell medication, and you need to have a license. That must be approved by the government, right? But if you are selling smartphone, selling shoes, right? Selling watches, approval is not required. So whether it's a partnership or sole proprietor, you only need a BR, but the BR is for tax declaration only. So that's not an approval procedure, right? No one's going to approve your business or not. But I want to ask you a question. How about company? How about company? So if I set up a bank, right? I have a bank here. And do you think that bank can, do something else other than banking? Or if I have a property company, do you think a property company can do something else apart from banking or property? Or if I have a company which is manufacturing, right? So I'm making electronics. Do you think my company, as a factory, can also sell fruits and bananas? Any of you know the answer? Can anyone help Simon? Right? He's very helpless. It depends on what being written in the article.
Business scope.
Business scope. Business scope.
Oh,
Business scope.
Oh, the scope, right? The scope of business. So you mean that whether something is stated in the article in order to restrict the scope of business of that company? Yes, you're correct. Right.
Okay.
You have Simon. Good. Other group of only this paper. The partnership being established. Your common purpose, but not profit, right? Okay. Yes, you're correct, right? You're correct. Because, well, that's one thing which is very important in the article, right? Something which is very important in the article. We call it object code, right? Object code. Well, I think that, just from the word object, you understand what it means. Object means objective, right? Objective. Purpose, right? Purpose. So object code means the purpose in setting up this company, right? The purpose in setting up this company. Why it matters? Number one, right? Number one. We look at the first paragraph. Under the old common law rules, a company must have an object clause in the article. And that being followed in the old company ordinance, Cap 32, right? In the old company ordinance. So it means that in the old days, when you set up a company, you must have object clause. It means that you have to state the purpose of your company. So what do you want to do, right? If you set up a company as a bank, then you can only offer banking service. You can only engage in banking business. If you set up your company as a factory in manufacturing electronics, then that's the only thing you can do, right? So company capacity will be limited and being restricted by the stated object, right? By the stated object. The rationale behind that the object clause can let the creditors and the outsiders know well on the scope of the business of the company. But originally, right? Originally, the object clause supposed to offer protections to the outsiders. Transparency. Why? Because you can check. Article, remember, right? It's always a public document. Because the article will be registered in the common registry. And you can do the common search, right? And you can find, and you can take a look. So before you sign any contract with the company, before you deal with the company, you can take a look at the article, right? And to make sure that your contract will be safe, will be valid. When you know that this company can only engage in banking service, then make sure that don't sign any contract to buy banana, right? To buy apples, fruits, or anything else, apart from banking business, right? So suppose, right? Suppose it helps to offer protection. So anything being done by the company beyond the object clause shall be regarded as ultra-wise. Not virus, right? Not virus. Not COVID-19, not virus. Ultra-wise. So Latin, right? It means beyond authority. Right? Beyond authority. So this is a legal concept. So always being used in civil action, right? Especially in judicial review in the last few years of Hong Kong. Right? If you still remember, so that's the previous legislative council election. Some of the candidates being disqualified, right? As a candidate for the election of the LACO. Do you remember that? So I'm not talking about politics, right? Just law. So some of them being disqualified as a candidate. So they apply for judicial review of that decisions from the election department. Right? And what they argue on this concept, ultra-wires. But they argue that the election officer acted beyond their authority to disqualify candidates. Right? But they argue that, right? They argue that the election officer only responsible for documentation. Right? It means just to make sure all the documents are in order. Right? You sign all the forms, right? You file all the forms, right? That's the candidate try to argue this, right? But of course the government, there are other arguments, right? The government argued that the election office, they have real substantial authority to disapprove application incompatible with the law, right? Something like this. Well, I'm not going to discuss all these cases, right? If you want to take a look, you can search Google for the news, right? But I want you to know ultra-wires. Right? Ultra-wires means beyond authority, right? Beyond your authorization. You don't have the right to do so, right? You don't have the right to do so. For example, right? So I have the right to mark your assignment, right? Because I sent the assignment. I have the right to mark your assignment because I'm your teacher in this module. But I don't have any right to recommend, to give some ideas to the teacher of other modules to fail your assignment, right? I have the right to fail your assignment. Even you apply for judicial review, I don't think you can succeed, right? But that's not ultra-wise. I have the right to do so. But if I recommend someone to fail your paper in our legal system, I'm acting ultra-wise because I'm acting beyond my authority, right? Then you can apply to judicial review, right? So, but don't worry, I won't do it. I won't do it. Okay. So ultra-wise is a very important concept because an ultra-wise act cannot be ratified by the members, even with unanimous consent. Do you remember that something we learned regarding the promoter, right? Regarding the promoter. So it means that even you make a secret profit, even you try to sell something of your own to the company, or you make a commission from it, you can handle the problem properly by what? Disclosure, right? And then to be ratified by the company. Right? You don't have the approval first, but later on when the company, when they're willing, right, to approve your transaction, then you will be fine. But for any act of ultra-wires, even for unanimous consent, it cannot be ratified. No, because it acts beyond the authority of the company. It means the company cannot engage in a contract like this. So it cannot be ratified, right? No, remember. So remember this thing. So think about the purpose of the object course. So originally, it's supposed to be something good. It's supposed to be something helpful. Because it's all about transparency, right? To alert the outsiders, to understand the nature of this company. Then you have to be aware of it, right? So don't sign any contract. Apart from selling, apart from banking, right? Apart from property. So don't sign a contract to buy banana, right? Otherwise you are banana, right? Just banana, right? So don't do it. But with the test of time, so later on we found that the object code actually not helping the outside, but in fact, this will pose a potential pitfall and unknown danger for any external party dealing with the company. Why? Because sometimes we're not aware of the object codes. So why you know the object codes? Because of me, right? Because you attended my class. So before that, maybe you never heard of it. You never think of it, right? Most of you, I mean that's normal, right? That's normal. For the lay person, or even for the businessman, they don't aware something being called an object codes. So it is something create problem rather than to resolve problem. To bring more problems. It's supposed to resolve the problems, right? To help alert the outside transparency. But at the end, it poses more problems. Because the outside party, they never learn about the object codes. So they sign a contract with the company, which is beyond the state object. And that will be very confusing, right? But don't worry too much. Don't worry too much about it. So don't worry too much about it. Why? Well, that's the old days, right? So that's what happened in the old days. So nowadays, you have the new company ordinance. So what you learned in the previous page, in page 6, it's all about the situations under the old company ordinance. It means before 2014, right? So nowadays, the situation far back under the new company ordinance, Act 622, except for companies operated in certain restricted areas, for example, trust, right, one of them. So otherwise, an object course is no longer a must under the new company ordinance, right? It means it's no longer necessary to have object course. So what it means by not having the object course, it means that according to section 115 subsection 1, a company now has the capacity, right, power, and privileges of a natural person of full age. So it means that nowadays a company is actually working like a normal human being of full age. Means over 18, actually over 21. You know the difference between 18 and 21. So if you're 18 years old, then you are adult, right? Under the law of Hong Kong. But so you enjoy almost all the legal rights when you're 18. 85% or 90%, but not 100%. So there's still something you cannot do until you are 21. For example, marriage. If you're below 18 years old, you cannot marry any person, right? You cannot have marriage. If you're over 18, you can have marriage, but still need the approval from your guardian or parents until you are 21 years old. Then you can do anything you like. And that 21 will be, say, like a person can become a director of a listed company. Right? So a little difference. But normally it means when you're 18 years old, you can do anything. Normally, right? Almost 85%. So the law states that under the new company ordinance, section 115 subsection 1. So a company nowadays is no longer required to have object course, right? No longer required to have object course because a company can do anything just like a normal human being. The law states that. So it means that a company has full capacity as a natural person, and the operation in general need not be authorized. So is it a good thing? It's a good thing. It's a good thing, right? Because the object course is not something really helpful. It creates a problem rather than solving problem. So the abolishment of object course requirement lowered the risk in dealing with a company because the external party no longer need to worry about whether the company has been acting beyond the stated purpose. So it means that if you sign a contract with the company, that contract, it works. Right? So you don't have to worry about the effectiveness or the validity of your contract because of some internal document. And you don't have to check it, right? So in general, it's a good thing, right? It's a good thing. I mean, by abolishing the object course. So nowadays you don't have to worry about it. If you use the model article, right, the object course already deleted in the model article. It means that you cannot find that particular provision in dealing with object course. You don't have to, right? Because the company can do anything. Unless, right, of course, unless in some restricted industry, like trust, right? But remember one thing, you have to be careful when you study law. Right? You have to be very sensitive to the wordings being used. So the law states that an object course is no longer required. But the law is not saying that an object course cannot be included. And that's different, right? You understand the difference here? It's not must, it means not necessary. Right? But you can still have it, right? You can still have it. The law is not saying that you cannot have object course. Right? It means it's optional, right? Optional. Okay, so we have to understand what happened if we still have object course. Because the position is a little bit different from the old days. In the old days, right, before 2014, when you engage in anything which is beyond the stated objects, so that thing, right, that transaction, that contract will be ultra-wise. It doesn't work at all. right? So that's in the old days. But what happened in nowadays under the new company ordinance? So we have to understand, right? So there are two sections. Section 116 of Section 1 and Section 116 of Section 5. To deal with the situation when you have an object course, right? When you don't have an object course, you don't have to worry about, anything here. But you do have an object course, right? You do have it. Then what happened? Number one, right? Number one. The general principle is that if a company has an object course, then the company shall not do anything against it. Well, simple, right? Well, simple, very easy to understand. It means if you have an object course, just follow the object course. Don't do anything against it. So if you have an object course saying that your company is manufacturing, right? It's manufacturing. So please only do the work for manufacturing. When you sign a contract with your customers, with your business partner, you only sign a contract related to the delivery of electronics, right? Which is within your stated objects. Easy, very easy to understand for this part, right? No problem, right? So easy. How about that one? Secondly, however, the company ordinance also states that an act shall not become invalid only because it violated the object course. Well, some tricky stuff here. So very tricky and a little bit confusing. Look at it again. But this is very simple, right? For paragraph 1. Very simple, very straightforward. So everyone can understand. But how about second paragraph? Okay, number one, right? Number one, okay, fine. Then you have an object course. We have to follow. Okay, fine. But what happens if I'm not following the object course? Well, that's your concern, right? But we know the law here, but we have more serious concern to know the consequence. The arbitral law. Do you remember I once shared my experience with you? Right? Because I'm always advising the management of the listed companies and their directors, right? So they want to do something bad. They don't really concern about the law, right? They have no concern of it. They're businessmen, they want to make money. So when I told them that if you do something like this, that is insider dealing, right? So market manipulation. They only ask the question, what will be the consequence? What will be the consequence? Well, am I going to get into jail or to pay a penalty? Right? If that is a criminal case, that will be arrested and to put in the jail. How long? Right? But they concern about the consequence, right? Not whether something is legal or illegal. Sometimes they don't care. Right? They just want to know the consequence of arbitral law. If there's something not so serious, right? It's only a penalty, they don't care. Right? They still do the bad thing. They know that there's only a penalty, right? And they can't afford, right? They don't care. Even if they need to go in jail, if there's only a few months, they don't care. Right? If they make a lot of money, I'm serious. They really ask about my consequence, right? What happened to arbitral law like this? Because it involves $1 billion of dollars, right? Inside dealing, right? Something really attractive. When you know something before the public concerning the market price of some of this company, and you make huge profit. So even you may get into jail for 1 or 2 years. Sometimes they don't really care, right? But they have lots of money to involve. Right. So I don't go too far. The problem is, on the first paragraph, you understand that if you have object course, you have to follow, right? But in the second paragraph, the law says that if you are not following the object course, that act, right, in that transaction, shall not become invalid only because it violated the object course. Well, you are confused. So what happened? Why man out? Why man there? I don't really understand. Right? Because on the one hand, say you should not do something like that. But if you are doing that, that's fine. Okay? No problem at all. Right? Your transaction is still valid. So why are you follow paragraph 1? If the transaction, even being violated the object course, still valid, right? So why I have to follow paragraph 1? Is there something wrong here? Is it a typo error? No. Is there anything wrong regarding the company ordinance in the drafting? Is there something wrong here? Inconsistent. Something illogical or inconsistent between the two paragraphs. Preliminary. Do you understand the dilemma here, right? Do you understand the dilemma here? Something inconsistent. Because on the one hand, you should not do something like this, but when you do something like this, that's fine. That's fine. No problem, don't worry about it. It's nonsense. No. No contradiction. Right? No contradiction. Why? The section 116 stated that the company shall follow the object course. They're not saying that any act violated the object course must necessarily become invalid because they are actually referring to different issues. Right? So actually, two paragraphs, they are referring to two different things. Right? Let's try to explain one by one. So first, you understand the dilemma, right? Between the two paragraphs, right? You understand that. So firstly, so we have to understand, number one, it means we first try to understand section 116, subsection 1, right? We try to understand the first paragraph. A company shall not act against the object course because the object course can by the internal management of the company, right? So actually, paragraph 1 refers to internal management. What I mean by binding the internal management of the company? Because the law further elaborated that by section 116, section 3. So I don't think you really need to memorize all the sections, right? Just to memorize the law will be fine, right? So no one actually remember all the section numbers, even for the lawyer, right? It's nonsense, right? To remember all the numbers. But you have to understand the principle. So the members of the company, they have power to restrain the directive to act against the state object course. It means that the members of the company can stop and act, which may act against the object course before it has been carried out. Very important concept here, right? So what we mean by the internal management of the company, if there's a state object inaudible, for example, this company can only engage in business for manufacturing, right? So you're the director of this company. You set up a company for manufacturing. I'm one of the members. I'm one of the shareholders of the company, but I'm not director, right? So you're director. So you're responsible for signing the contract. So I learned that you want to sign a contract with Simon, right? Instead of banana, right? Instead of banana. But I know that because by looking at the articles, I understand that this company can only do the business of manufacturing. So you do something beyond the state object, and I have the right to apply to court for an order to stop it, right? Before that thing being carried out, before you really completed the transaction. So I can get a court order to stop your action, right? So that's why the law says that you have to follow this object course because it by the internal management of the company, right? Right? Okay. But why? Why? The law also says that an act shall not become invalid only because it violates the object course. Why? You know the same paragraph. An act is not invalid only because it is against the object course. It means that an object course shall only by the company, but not an outsider. It is very important. That said, the power of shareholder is not directed to do something, but not including any act which have already been executed or accomplished. So I learned that you, as a director, want to sign a contract beyond the state object, right? Before you completed the whole transactions. So I have the right to get a court order to stop you, right? So that's why you have to follow the object code, right? You should not do anything against the object code. But for whatever reason, right? I didn't aware that you already completed the transaction with Simon in San Bernardino, and I learned about it later, right? The transaction already completed, and the third party already involved, and I don't have any right. I don't have any right to invalidate these transactions between you and Simon, even if it violated the object course. So that's why the same paragraph saying that an act shall not become invalid only because it violated the object course. Because once a third party being because once a third party being involved, I can do nothing. And and that act, that transaction, still perfectly valid, even if violated object codes. So the underlying rationale is actually very simple. Object codes can only govern internal parties because it is something stated in the article, right? It's something stated in the article. The article is the Constitution, and the Constitution only governs internal matters. Constitution cannot govern external matters. Why I should be bound by your article, right? Simon is an outsider, is another businessman, not a member of his company. If you do anything against the object code, why Simon should be suffered from it? So object code is not valid against any third party, but internal party. So there's no dilemma here. So the two paragraphs referring to two different scenarios, right? So I hope that you understand. It's very important. But apart from the problem object codes of section 116, I hope that you still remember another concept we learned it in agency. And that's why I told you already, right? You have to learn about agency. Even you don't have any questions directly on agency. Because when you study company law, you assume to understand the law of agency. So apart from section 116, subsection 5, something we just learned, because of apparent authority, an outsider can also hold a company responsible for the act of the directors because of the principle of apparent authority under the law of agency. So any of you still remember the law of apparent authority? It means apparently to the outsider, it seems like that you have that authority. Then you will be bound by that authority. So because why this guy is having apparent authority? Because he's a director. And director to be assumed under company ordinance to be an agent of the company, right? Even you don't really have that authority to sign a contract in Silent Banana, but you have apparent authority. Because when you show your name card to Simon, you learn that you are the director, right? And that's common sense. The director is the one to manage the company. Directors, they are senior management of the company. They're actually the managers of the company. So you are not someone, you're not messenger, right? You are not receptionist, but you are director. So that's apparent authority. And even without referring to section 116, so section 5, regarding everything of the stated objects, right? Of the ultra-wise concept note. Even we just rely on the principle of apparent authority, you may still liable, right? Unless one thing. The possible exception is that when an outsider actually learned about the ultra-virus, and that will be different, right? We call it actual notice, right? Actual notice. So in law, we have two different kinds of notice. One kind we call actual notice, another kind we call constructive notice. They are different. The only scenario, right, that Simon cannot really enforce the contract ultra-virus, right? The only scenario is you actually learned about the ultra-virus, actual notice. For example, right, before you sign any contract, sorry, how is it? Philips, right? Before Simon signed a contract with Philips, you get a notice from this company and stated that you can sign or negotiate a contract with Philips, but only for manufacturing purpose, but not other than that. Because our company are being restricted for doing manufacturing business only, then you are having actual notice, right? So if you have actual notice, then you cannot rely on apparent authority because you already landed, right? But a third party shall not presume to have notice of the object code because it has been stated in the article. Remember that article is a public document. So everyone, when you do the company search, So you can find the article. It means you can find the article. But you cannot deem them, you cannot sue. All the parties, they already searched about your article and to learn about your article, which is something we call constructive notice. You cannot assume constructive notice. It means you deemed the other party to learn about because that information is public, right? You cannot do so. No. So the only way that you can insist on, no. So the only way, right, that you cannot rely on internal authority is for the company to actually notify the outsider regarding your internal regulation. If that happens, right, then you cannot rely on internal authority. That contract will be absolutely effective, right? One more thing, right? Apart from the problem of ultra-virus or internal authority, in addition to the mentioned restrictions, where shareholders are entitled to restrain the directors in conformance with an act. So according to common law principle, right, based on common law principle, a director will be in breach of fiduciary duty if he acts contrary to the company articles. So even we disregard all the ultra-virus problem, right? So anything related to the internal authority or the effectiveness of a contract beyond the state object. Whenever a director, right, when Philip sign a contract beyond the state object, he already in breach of fiduciary duty as a director. The company can sue you, and you may need to pay compensation to the company. So don't do it. Right? So the director may be liable to compensate the company for any losses that may be incurred. Maybe 2 more pages, then we have a break. Right? Okay. So that's all about the object code. Right? That's all about object code. So let's talk about the nature of the article. Well, we learned that article is a constitution. So that's by referring to the status of the article, because it is the highest regulations, and it stipulated the composition of the company, and it also govern internal regulation. So we call it a constitution by referring to its status. But how about the nature in law? What do you say? It is a contract. Right? So very interesting, right? Very interesting. The very nature of the article is that it is contractual. Right? Contractual means it's a contract. Actually, it's a contract. So why is a contract? Why is a contract? Let the law say that. Section 86, subsection 1 say that the nature of the article as a contract between the company and member, right? It's a contract, actually it's a contract between member and company, and also a contract between the members themselves. So this is a contract between company and member, right? It's a contract, remember, right? Contractual. Just like the foundation of a partnership is also contractual. You agree, a group of people agree on something with a common purpose for profit, then you form a partnership. So the base of a partnership is also contract. And the very nature of article is contract, contractual. So if it is a contract, the contract shall be enforceable. The law also says that the article are enforceable by the company against each member. It means that the company can sue the member if the member is not following the article. And the company can also, the member can also sue the company if the company is not following the article. And member against each other member if one of the members is not following the article. Because the article itself is a contract, right? It's a contract between all these parties here, right? Contract, contractual. But this contract, article, is something quite unusual. It is not a normal contract. It's not a normal contract. The article shall be regarded as statutory contract or unusual contract. I once asked the question in exam regarding the definition of statutory contract. and unuseful contract. So I'm not saying that you will have the same question, but just I once asked the question on the definition of statutory contract and unuseful contract. So why we call the article as statutory contract or unuseful contract? Because the article is not subject to the normal rules of contract. Number one, why we call it statutory contract, unusual contract? So why article is not from the normal rules of contract? Number one, if by some member who subscribes to the shares of a company, even though they have never entered into contract directly. So I have to teach you some basic contract law principle, right? Something you are going to learn about later in this program, right? When you study the law of obligation. You're not yet, right? You're not yet learned anything about contract law. But I can tell you that how to form a contract, not a piece of paper. Absolutely not. Right? A piece of paper is not required to form a contract, except for some situations. For example, when you are buying a piece of land. When you buy a piece of land, the law states that you have to make it written. Or when you sign a tenancy agreement, you have to make it written because you have to pay stamp duty. You know stamp duty, stamp voucher, right? If you are not having a stamp, then your tenancy agreement is not valid. Right? So if your tenant is not paying you rent, you cannot sue your tenant. So you don't have the stamp duty. So when you have a tenancy agreement, you have to make it written, right? So except for some kind of contract, normally the normal rule is that a contract is not necessarily as a piece of paper. You don't have to make it a piece of paper, right? So that is the general rule. And how to form a contract? 4 elements, always remember. Number one, intention, right? You really want to have a contract. You are not making a joke, right? You are not making a joke. You are not making negotiation. You want to make it binding. So you need to have intention. Number 2, you need to have offer. Think about the negotiation of a contract. Offer, O-F-F-E-R, right? So always someone offer something. So use a very simple example. Buy and sell contract, right? Buy and sell contract. So I want to buy the phone from Simon. So that's how a contract, arises. I want to buy the phone from Simon, $2,000, right? So that's an offer. If you are willing, you say yes, right? Then that's acceptance. So the second element is offer. It means someone must propose something. You think about a contract, right? How a contract arises. Someone proposes something first, and then another person responds to it. Of course, you can reject, right? Or you can counter offer. Right? You can reject, no, this is not for sale. Or you counter offer. Okay, I'm going to sell my phone, but $5,000, right? Then you are making counter offer. Then I'm responding to your offer again, right? Fair enough. Anyway, over acceptance. Right? Someone proposes something, another person responds to it. Number 4, consideration. You have to pay for it. You have to pay for it. Later, when you learn contract law, your lecturer is going to ask you one question. Why Santa Claus never being sued in court? You know Santa Claus? Who is Santa Claus? 是咪老人? Oh, come on, right? Santa Claus. Why Santa Claus never being sued in court? There are a lot of Santa Claus everywhere on December, right? But no one being sued in high court or breach of contract. Why? So think about Santa Claus. Suppose Santa Claus is true, is real, right? So always you make a risk. Santa Claus, I make a risk here. I want to have a very pretty girlfriend. To go to the Christmas party. You make a risk. And Santa Claus promise, okay, yes, fine, right? You're going to have a pretty girlfriend. And Christmas party. And on that day, nothing happened. I only get Phillips at that time, right? So only some guys here with no pretty girls. So I want to sue Santa Claus, right? Come on, Santa. Do you know I'm a lawyer? Right? Do you know so you lie to a lawyer. What will be the legal consequence? Sue you in court. Right? Then actually, Santa Claus never been sued in court. Why? Because when I make a wish to Santa Claus, and Santa Claus say yes, right? I pay for nothing. That's only a gift. Because in law, in contract law, a gift is not something protected by the law, right? You can only get the protection of the law when you pay for it. It can be $1. $1 is enough when you pay for it. But if you are not paying for it, it's only a gift. And there's only moral commitment. And you cannot sue for moral commitment. Right? Okay. I teach something to you in advance to your law of obligation. Remember the 4 elements. And the thing about our article. So if you are a member, the law says that, right? If you are a member of the company, then you will be subject to contractual relationships with the other members and the company. But think about how you join the company. Do you have the intention of offer acceptance consideration? Not necessarily. You only do one thing. You bought the shares. You subscribe the shares. And you become bounding to this contract. But that's not the normal rules of contract law. You get my point here? Because the only thing you did is you paid for the shares. That's all. Right? So the four elements may not exist. Number one. Number two, think about the amendments of the terms of the contract. So normally, right, for example, when 100 parties concluded a contract, well, that's possible, right? That's rare, but possible. 100 parties concluded a contract, right? All of them signed on it, right? Signed on this contract, right? 100 different signatures. So 100 parties signed on this contract. For example, I want to change one provision in this contract, right? I want to change just one provision. And I have the agreement of 99 parties, except for one, right? It means 100 parties signed on this contract. 99 out of them agreed with the amendment. Just one person object. Can I change that provision? No, you cannot, right? But if you want to change anything, even for just a comma or full stop, or just one single word, if you want to change anything, you need to have mutual consent for all the parties. That's the rule of contract law. Then you think about the articles. Even articles is contractual in nature, but the law states that you can always change the article when you pass a special resolution, which is 75% only. So the articles can be changed without full consent of all the members and shareholders, but only 75%. So which is against the general rules in contract law. All right? So that's why we are saying that article is a statutory contract or unusual contract. Because it's a contract by law. The law says that. But this contract is not following the normal principle in contract law, right? Maybe we have a break first, right? 15 minutes, right?
誒
me back to class, right? Back to class. So before the break, so I told you that the nature, right, the very nature of the article is contract or contractual. But this contract is different from other contracts. And that's what we call a statutory contract or unusual contract. Because the article, even as a contract, is not following the general principle of contract law. I will just explain to you one, because of the creation. So how this contract being created is different from a normal contract. Another one, regarding the amendment. So usually, when you want to amend a contract, you need to have full consent of all the signing parties, or all the parties. So even you have 99 parties out of 100 agree on something regarding amendment, that's still not valid. If you have 100 parties, if you want to change anything, just for one full stop, just for one comma, you still need to have 100 parties. It means 100% mutual consent in order to change anything. But for articles, the law states that you only need to pass a special resolution, and which is 75%, then you can change the article, right? An article is a contract by law. Okay. So let's try to illustrate this concept of article as a contract by referring to the different parties here. So number one, let's think about the members of the company, right? Think about the members of the company. So I want to show some cases. So how the parties, they try to enforce their right inside the contract. Sorry, inside the article, right? As a contract. Remember, the article can be enforced by the company against a member or a member against the company, all right? So let's take a look at some cases here. This one first, Hickman versus Kent. A provision in the article states that dispute between members and the company must be settled by arbitration. What's arbitration? I told you last time. 仲裁, right? 仲裁, right? Arbitration. So something we call the ADL, alternative dispute resolution. It means that sometimes when you want to settle a dispute, you don't have to, not necessarily to sue someone in court, because you can settle your problem by arbitration, right? So there's something being promoted by the government nowadays to the legal professions. So like Hong Kong is an arbitration center, right? So there are a lot of lawyers that are trying to be arbitrators. So arbitration is something like, negotiations based on some rules, some of them by the law, some of them by your own, in order to settle your problem. So you don't have a judge. Right? You don't have a judge. You appoint an arbitrator. So that person is a professional, right? It's a chartered arbitrator or a lawyer, in order to settle your problem, right? So once the conflict being resolved, then everyone shall be bound by it. If anyone is not following the arbitration award, right? That's the decision of the arbitrator at the end. Then the other party who suffer from it can sue in court based on that arbitration award in order to enforce it, right? So that's arbitration. You're going to learn all the details if you proceed to the advanced diploma, because you have to learn about civil procedure, right? So I'm not going to tell you for all the details. But that is what being stated in this article. The article states that if anything wrong, if you have a dispute between a member and the company, so that problem must be settled by arbitration, all right? Must be settled by arbitration. But one of the members wanted to ignore this requirement and to resolve this issue in court. Because the member argued that, well, come on, this is something for reference, right? To settle the problem by arbitration is something for reference. Because I'm now having a problem related to the article itself, right? Something related to the article. So I should not be bound by the article. So this is something for reference. And to sue someone in court is my right. Do you understand that? That's a fundamental right to all the citizens in this society, right? Under the common law system. You have the right to sue anyone. And you may be sued by any others. But the right to sue normally cannot be restricted, right? You can normally say you cannot sign a contract with your employer, and then
you promise that in case anything wrong, I cannot sue my employer. No, even you sign a contract like this, that provision is invalid, right? That's not allowed because that's against the basic law, not the basic law, the basic common law principle. So this person wants to argue that, I'm sorry, no, right? I have the right to sue anyone. So this provision is only for reference. But the court held that the company could enforce such a provision strictly, right? The court disagreed. No, right? It has nothing to do with your fundamental right. When you enter into the contract, when you subscribe to shares, when you're a member of this company, the article is contractual, right? So it means that you are not being deprived of your right to sue. But you only agree that in case I have a problem with this company, I have to settle by arbitration first. You know the difference between the two, right? I'm not saying that you cannot sue in court, but you have to settle the problem by arbitration first, because that's what being stated in the article. An article in a contract, so you have to do it first. So you have nothing to do with your fundamental legal right. So it means that the court will strictly enforce all the provisions in the article, right? You have to follow, right? You have to follow because it is contractual, right? It's contractual. It's not for reference, right? Not for reference. Another case. So this case is about a member suing a company, right? Another case. The article of the company stated that the service fund shall be distributed by way of dividends. Do you know what's dividend? Dividends, right? It means the profit distributed to all the shareholders based on your shareholding, the percentage of your shareholding. So if the company make a profit for $100, if you hold 40% of the shares, then you entitled to $40, right? Something like this. Not necessarily, but so that's the way of the operation of dividend, right? Right? So the articles of the company stated that service fund shall be distributed by way of dividends, right? Stated in the articles. But the director instead recommended the issuance of debentures. So the court, right? That's a provision in the article in saying that if the company make profit, like all the profit, the service fund shall be distributed by way of dividends, right? But now the director is not following the article, not following the article. So instead, the directors recommended the issuance of debentures, right? Debentures, right? You know, something else, another investment instrument. I'm going to explain to you later. But just something else, right? Not following the article. The directors want to argue that, come on, the article is for reference only. Why? Because it is a commercial decision, right? So that's not possible that the commercial decision shall be bound by or to be governed by the article. It should be case by case because it involves money. And you know the answer. That's that argument being rejected by the court. No, not allowed, right? No. The court held that the member could rely on the relevant provision of the articles. It means that you can insist on for the company to pay dividends because article is contractual. It's a contract. When you promise something, then you have to do it. If you are not doing it, it's a piece of contract, and you can sue the other party, right? So two simple cases, but just to illustrate one single point, article, anything in the article is not for reference, right? Not for reference, not as a general guideline, but it is part of a contract. Everything stated in the article shall be regarded as contractual. So if anyone is not following the article, the other party who suffer from it can sue in court for breach of contract. All right? So that's the point I want you to learn about. Then how about directors? How about directors? Take a look at section 86 again. So take a look again. So section 86 states that a contract, article is a contract, right? Article is a contract. An article is a contract between the company and each member, and also a contract between member and member, right? Where are the directors here? Do we have directors here? Can you find directors here? No, right? No. No directors here. So you can say that this contract, this statutory contract, has nothing to do with the directors. Law says that very clearly. It's only a contract between company and member, and members and company, and also between members and members, but no directors, right? So remember. So as a general rule, right? As a general rule, Section 86 does not say that the article also constitutes a contract between the company or members and the directors. No. So a director is not part of this contract, right? This statutory contract or unusual contract is not a party in this contract, right? Bear in mind first. But there are always exceptions in the law. There are two possible exceptions. We have to be careful when we are handling a director, right? When sometimes something related to the article and also related to the directors, you have to be careful because there are exceptions. As a general rule, the director is not a party, right? But there are exceptions. Number one. Two possible exceptions. Number one, what about membership? Do you remember that case when we learned about the Songwriting Principle, right? The lease and leave air farming case, right? Remember that pilot?
Yes.
He was also a director and a member, a controlling shareholder, member, and also an employee, right? So he was killed in one of the violations, and his wife wanted to sue the company for compensation, right? And the arguing point was whether he actually was an employee, whether he was a real employee, right? Do you remember the case? So in that case, apart from learning the Songwriting Principle, we also learned another new concept that the court recognized what? A multiple capacity of a person. So it means that normally a legal status of a person is not mutually exclusive to the other legal capacity. So it means that you can be a major shareholder of a company at the same time as a director, and at the same time also as an employee. They are not mutually exclusive. So you cannot argue that, or you should not misunderstand that if you are having one of the capacity, then you cannot have another capacity, right? Normally, that is not the law. Because in law, a person can be recognized with multiple capacity, right? Okay, so this concept also applies to director. Because that's not uncommon for a director also be a member of a company. That's very usual, right? Very usual. So the court recognized that the director can have dual capacity, and he can enforce right in the article as a member, as the case may be. It means that, right, even Philip is also a director, is a director of this company. He can also be a member of this company. So you cannot argue that, oh, because you are a director, anything related to the article has nothing to do with you. So you cannot have such an argument like this because he can still sue on based on the article because he is having another capacity. Just change the face. Another face and become another person, right? And that is allowed because you can have multiple capacity, right? So number one. Number two, we have to think about employment. We have to think about employment. So look, remember one thing first. I will ask you again in lecture 7, because at that time most of you already forgot. A director is not an employment, right? So don't mix up the two. And a directorship is a statutory position. You still remember, right? It's a statutory position. It means the law created the position of a director or directorship. But director is not an employee. A director can also be an employee, be employed. You can do that, right? Just like CEO. CEO normally is also a director of a company, but not necessarily, because CEO is a job title, right? It's a job title. Chief Executive Officer is not a statutory position. is a job title only. It means that the law never defines CEO. Right? So CEO can be Chief Entertainment Officer, right? The one to organize party. No one saying that the CEO must be Chief Executive Officer. Even you are Chief Executive Officer, you can still be the one to clean the toilet. But who cares? The CEO is not a statutory position, right? It's only job title. So don't mix up. Directorship is not employment, but you can also be employee. Up to you, right? You can pay a director. Even you pay a director, it doesn't mean that he's an employee. You have to sign a contract, right? That can be something we call, I don't remember exactly how to call it. Right? Anyway, you pay a director, it means you can pay for his service, but it doesn't mean that that person being employed, you have to be very careful. If you want to employ that person, you have to make it specific to sign a contract for employment contract. So that person can be employed as a director, right? The job title is also a director or CEO, something like this. Anyway, the most important point is that director is not equivalent to employment, but a director can be employed, right? Can be employed. So if the director being employed by the company, then he can enforce the relevant provisions regarding employment, just like other employees. If there are any provision in the articles related to employee or related to employment, and as an employee, he can also rely on it and to sue on it, right? Even he is just a director. Okay? Then how about members and members? How about members and members? Remember that Section 86, subsection 2, states that each member has a personal right to enforce the articles against another member. Because article is contractual, not just between member and company, but also between members and members. I think that's quite simple, right? Quite straightforward. As a member, right? The article says something. For example, right? One thing. For example, something we call preemption right. Preemption right. Any of you remember what is preemption right? So try to recall the definition of a private company, right? So there are 3 restrictions regarding a private company. Number 1, you cannot invite the public to invest in your company. Number 2, you cannot have more than 50 members, right? And also, there must be restrictions regarding the transfer of shares. So preemption right is a very common restriction in a private company. It means that if you are a member, right? I'm a member, and all you guys are also members of this company. If I want to quit, right? If I want to quit from this company, I cannot sell the shares to the third party or the outside party. I have to offer my shares to the existing party first. When all of you reject, then only after that I can sell the shares to the outside party, right? So that's what we call preemption right. So preemption right is one thing which governs the relationship between the members. So if I try to sell the shares to the outsider first, without first seeking for all your approval, right? All you guys, then all you guys can sue me for breach of contract, all right? Because article is a contract between the members, and preemption right is one of the provisions in this contract. So if I'm not following this provision, then you can sue me, right? Simple, straightforward. So normally we don't have any problem in order to understand the right between the different members, right? But sometimes when that person is also a director, then the problem will be a little bit complicated. And that's what the case being happened here. What happened in this case? There was a provision in the article in saying that the member can always offer shares to the director at a fair price. So that's one of another restriction. Preemption right is all about the right between the different members. It means that you want to sell shares, you have to get the approval from the other member first. But sometimes we have another kind of restriction in saying that if you want to sell the shares, you can always offer your shares to the director, right? To the directors. And this is one of the provisions in the article of this company. 你即係可以賣咗俾 director 先將啲股票 right? So a member wants to sell his shares, but the director is also a member, and the director are also members. Refuse to take them and argue that the article will not be enforced against the director. So that's the provision in saying that you can, right? You can offer the shares to the directors. So that member tried to do this, but that members argue that no, I'm a director, and I'm not part of the article. Do you remember? Right? Section 86. Section 86 stated that the article is the only contract between member and company, but nothing to do with the director. So the director argued that no, I'm sorry, he cannot enforce anything against me based on the articles because I'm not a part of your contract, right? Yes, well, I think it's logical, right? Nothing wrong, but because the director, they are also members, right? They are also members. If the directors are having due capacity, then what happened? The court held that the directors were bound by the articles, right? Why? Not because as a director, but in their capacity as a member. Again, the same concept. Multiple capacity or due capacity. So the case illustrated that a member will be bound by the article regardless of the other capacity, right? So if you are a member, then you will be bound by the articles. So even you are also a director, it will have no impact. It will not change your status as a member to be bound by the article, right? So once you are a member, then you will be subject to the article. Whether you are also a director, it doesn't matter. But if you are just a director, then you will not be bound by any provision in the article, right? Not as a contract. You have to be careful, right? If you breach anything in the article, then you have a problem for breach of fiduciary duty as a director, right? I explained to you in great detail in lecture 7. But as a director, you own fiduciary duty to the company. Fiduciary duty means the duty of honesty. Right? You always need to act on the best interest of the company. But that is not a breach of contract. Right? Always remember. Something wrong with that person you want to sue. When you think about a legal problem, you have to understand what you can sue on. We call it cause of action. Right? It means something wrong, you want to sue. Then you must have a reason to sue in court, right? So that's different. A member can breach an article. It means that member breach the contract, right? So you can sue based on breach of contract. But when a director breach the article, so that will be a breach of fiduciary duty, but not a breach of contract. You get my point? So you have to be careful. You need to have a very clear conceptual understanding and everything. All right? How about the enforcement by external parties for any provision in the article? How about external parties? So I think the answer will be quite straightforward, right? Quite straightforward. So we always try to recall all the stipulations in Section 86. Because Section 86 stated clearly, article as a contract, so only be binding between company and members, and members and members, and that's all, right? So, so an article as a contract is not binding to the directors. And so do the external parties, of course. Try to remember the case related to the object course. So why the object course is not binding once the third party being involved? Do you remember, I explained to you the limitation of the object course. And so third party is not part of your company. And third party shall not be governed by anything inside your company. Right? Because I'm not part of your company. Do you think that Americans shall be bound by the basic law? No. Right? But he is not a resident in Hong Kong, right? So it shall not be bound by your law. It's your problem, right? Not my problem. So that's the same logic here, right? The same logic here. So the general principle is that an outsider cannot enforce any provision in articles. So that's a general rule, right? Very easy to understand, right? Of course. I think like the Japanese cannot enforce any article in the basic law for what, right? You're not a Chinese resident. You don't enjoy any right under the basic law, right? So the same. You cannot sue for anything in Japan based on the Japanese constitution, right? Because you are not Japanese. Easy, right? Because you are external party. So that's the general rule, right? So that's the general rule. But something more we have to, think about. Because sometimes the situation will be complicated, right? Will be complicated. Why? Because we have a very interesting case here. The article governs the right and obligations between the members of the company, but not between outside of the company, right? Simple, right? Straightforward. This requirement will be strictly interpreted. Why? It means that even the right concerning the members, even there are right concerning the members, but it can only be enforced when the person has a status as a member at the correct moment. Okay, you understand that as a member, you are under the protection, not protection. As a member, you are entitled to sue in articles based on contract or based on contractual relationship, right? You understand that? No problem, right? No problem. Quite easy, straightforward. But sometimes you have to think about timing. Right? Timing. Because time is something important regarding your status. We have a very interesting case here, a very old case in 9th century, right? But the legal principle is still the same. Sometimes the student asks me a question, why we have to rely on a very old case, but not the latest one? Well, why? Because if that case still valid, if that principle still valid, then we refer to the old case. Right? We don't have to refer to the new case. Say like this case is from 19th century, right? But that case being followed by all the different cases until the latest one, right? We have the latest one versus so on 2019, right? Of course, this is a very new case. It's 1 year ago. But because this case still follows exactly the same principle as this one, that as authority for study or to argue a case in court, you quote this one, but not this one, right? So until this principle being overruled, then you call a new case, right? For example, if this case overruled the principle here, then starting from 2019, you call this case regarding external party, but no longer this one. But if this case still governing the law, right? Still the law, right? If it's still the law, you call it okay. No matter how old it is, no matter when you are studying law or even in court, all right? So don't ask me a question why we use okay. I hope that you understand. And that's why we still use the Solomon principle. So why we still rely on the Solomon case. The Solomon case, the principle is Solomon. In the Solomon case still prevailing. Everyone still following Solomon case. So we use Solomon case, right? We don't have to use this case. Even the principle in this case is the same as the Solomon case. We still rely on Solomon case, right? You get the logic here. Okay. So this is a very interesting case. What happened here? The plaintiff reached an agreement with the promoter of the company that a special provision could be included in the article of the future company. That person will be appointed as a permanent legal advisor of the company. Well, you already learned about promoter, right? Promoter means a person responsible for contractual negotiation for a company not yet existed, right? You learned it in the previous lecture. So that's what happened. So someone negotiating with the promoter, for example, right? Amber, right? Decide I can be a legal advisor, right? I can be a legal advisor. So how are you going? Angela, right? So I negotiated a contract with Angela for a company that not yet existed, right? The company will be incorporated later, but not yet existed. So you are promoter, right? You are promoter. And I made agreement with you, right? I made agreement with you. You promised that later on when you incorporate a company, you are going to drop a provision, right? There will be a provision. And stating that Mr. Edward Tong will be appointed as a legal advisor of this future company permanently. All right? So we agreed on it. So we made a contract, right? We made a contract. You as a promoter, right? You as a promoter. I subsequently also became one of the members. Right? It means after the incorporation of your company, I joined the company as a member. Right? Okay. But after the incorporation of the company, the director of that company refused to offer me the job. Right? Company incorporated, right? ABC Limited. But the company, right? Phillips is the director. He doesn't like me, right? Right? So he refused to offer me the job, right? Because I look better than Phillips. Come on. All right. So the point is that I try to enforce that provision. Oh, come on, right? I'm a member. I'm now a member, right? Of this company. And as a member, I can enforce article. Am I correct? I can enforce article. Because it's a contract. It's a contract between company and the member. So I can enforce it. And you have to offer me the job. Do you think this argument will be accepted by the court? Well, it seems like logical, right? But which is perfectly following the rules in the company ordinance. The law states that article is a contract between company and member. I'm a member. The company agreed to offer me a job, then you have to do it. Otherwise, sue you, right? Think about the judgment in the court. The court held that the agreement was made with the plaintiff before incorporation. So that's why I asked you, you have to think about timing, right? So think about timing. So I'm not saying that any contract agreed with the promoter and the third party will be invalid. You learned about all the rules in the previous lecture, right? If that's being ratified by the company, the contract is valid. But the problem has nothing to do with pre-incorporation contract. But the problem is, in this case, related to the status of a member at the right moment. At that particular time, the plaintiff was only an outsider, right? When the contract was being made, the party was only an outsider. An outsider cannot enforce rights under the article, even if he subsequently became a member. So it means that, right? It means that even an article related to a member, that you have to think about the timing, because that provision being included by way as a contract before the incorporation. And it means at that time I was not a member. So even subsequently I became a member, I cannot enforce that provision because timing will be strictly interpreted by the court. All right? So very interesting case. Okay, how about the alteration of the article? It means how to change the article. So article is something very important, right? Do you agree? Yes. I think so, right? Absolutely important. Why? Because article is the constitution of the company. And constitution governs the internal management and the composition of the company. Just like the constitution, right? So if you can change the articles, then it means somehow you can manipulate the company. Am I correct? I think so. So that's why I'm always saying that 75% is a magic number in company law. Because once you achieve 75% of shareholders, then you can change article. Article is all about internal regulation. It means the rules of the game. So how we play the games here, right? So if you can set the rules, you are the one to dominate. Right? 你仲夠我玩，係咪？規則就我定，你點搞我鬥啊？ Right? So you are the one to set the rules. I am in a dominating position. I'll always be the winner. So, as a corporate lawyer, you always need to remember the two magic numbers here. Right? Another one is 51%. I'll explain to you later. But remember this one first. 75%. Right? 75%. You don't have to care about more than that sometimes. Because when you are in control of 75%, you basically control everything. Right? You basically control everything. So even there are some members remaining, but they can't do anything against your will. Right? Because once you achieve 75%, the law says that section 88, you can change article. You can change the rules of the game. How to manage the company internally, right? Can't do anything. Just remember, the mode of alteration of statutory contract is different from an ordinary contract. When mutual consent is not required. For a normal contract, when you have 100 parties, if you want to change anything, even for just a comma, just a full stop, or just one single word, you need to have 100% agreement, and there will be no exception. But that's not the case. For others, you only need to have 5% in terms of shareholding. Right? Shareholding. And the alteration will even bind those members who disagree or to vote against the alteration. So even you vote against it, it doesn't happen. Right? It's still bound by it, because that's the law. Right? The law states that. But you have to use it. So sometimes, well, that's the way in studying law. Once you learn a legal principle, right, then you assume that you are a powerful person starting from this moment because you are so learned in the law, right? And then you will be very disappointed in the next minute because you are going to learn about there are lots of exceptions to the legal rules we just learned. There are always exceptions. There are always exceptions to the general legal principle. And there are exceptions to the exception to the exception to the exception to the exception. Right? So there are lots of exceptions. And that's why you need lawyers. So don't think about to handle everything by yourself. Find good lawyers, right? You can think about it. Why? Because in the previous page, I told you that if you acquire 75%, you are in a dominating position. And you can change the articles, right? You change the rule of the game. This is correct, of course, right? I'm not saying that's wrong. That's absolutely correct. But it doesn't mean that you are not subject to any kind of restriction. It means when you change the rules, when you change the articles, you cannot change the article in a way to against something, right? And the first one is you cannot change the article in a way to violate company ordinance. I think that's not really difficult to understand, right? And it's common sense also. You cannot change anything against the law, right? Of course. The law is always at the highest position. And articles only a private agreement, which is subject to the company ordinance. So anything against the company ordinance will be invalid. I can give you some example. You cannot change the article in saying that you have the right to return the share capital to the members. So it means that once you pay for it, right, and then you get the share, you cannot just return the money and ask the member to return the share to you. No, right? That's not allowed. Not allowed in company ordinance. If you want to do it, you have to go through a very complicated procedure. We call it reduction of capital, but that is not included in this module, right? Unless you proceed to the advanced diploma, and unless you pay more tuition fees to all your space, right? Then you can learn about it. Maybe the same teacher. 就俾咁多錢係實驗嘅，冇。No free lunch, right? No free lunch. If you want to know more, you have to pay more, right? Okay. And another one, right? Another one. Like you cannot restrict the members to apply for writing off. Well, there can be many examples. I don't have to, talk about it one by one. It's a general rule, remember, right? Of course, you can change the article, but you cannot change the article in a way to against the company ordinance. Right? Even if you change anything which is against the company ordinance, that's not valid. It doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. All right. So that is simple and straightforward regarding any provision in the company ordinance. It means that you cannot change the articles in a way against anything specifically stated in the company ordinance, right? So that's easy to understand. But we have another abstract legal principle we also need to follow. Right? Abstract tends to be very abstract, right? So not that straightforward, but still binding to anyone who proposes to change the article, right? We have another principle here. Number two, the amendments cannot contradict with the common law. It means the general principle is that it must be with good faith for the benefit of the company as a whole. Well, that's very abstract. The common law principle state that must be, if you change the article, it must be for the goodness of the company. It must be our good faith. But that's very abstract, right? Very abstract. Not that clear as the previous one, right? Previous one is very straightforward. You just cannot against anything in the company audit, right? You can just take a look at a company audit to see whether your amendments violated the provision in company audit. But what I mean by good faith, and what I mean by good faith for the benefit of the company as a whole, it's a common law concept. So I can't tell you exactly what it is. We can only refer to some cases in order to understand what I mean by good faith. Let's take a look at this case. So a company wants to change the article. So the majority can buy out the share of the member who was engaging in the competing business with the company, right? So I'm the majority of this company. I'm holding, I don't know, maybe at least more than 75%, right? But if I'm not holding 75%, I cannot change the article at once. I hold 75%, and other members hold 25%, right? Hold 25%. But that member is a bad guy, bad member, because that member is engaging in a competing business with the same company. Well, within law, there's not much I can do about it. Unlike the director, right? The director owns fiduciary duty to the company. So as a director, you cannot do anything against your own company. Otherwise, I can sue you for breach of fiduciary duty. But as a member, just a member or shareholder, you can do so, absolutely. You don't own a fiduciary duty to your company. It means as a shareholder of this company, right? You hold 25%, but you can also run another business to compete with this company, right? And you are absolutely right to do so. Okay, so I cannot sue you. So I try to change an article in a way that I can, buy out all your shares and then kick you out, right? So I want to do this. Of course, the minority argue that no, this is against the good faith of the company, right? But you want to kick some members out. How the court think of it? The court held that the alteration in this amendment was valid because you have to think about the purpose, right? Why I'm doing this? The alteration was to give the director the power to expel a member. The system was detrimental to the benefit of the company. It means I try to kick out a bad guy, someone who tried to hurt this company. So it was regarded as a bona fide decision. Bona fide means honest, right? Honest. An honest decision for the benefit of the company, right? So this is one of the examples. One example. But remember, this is only a common law principle, right? I can tell you exactly what you have to do, just case by case. But anyway, the point is you must aim for the welfare of the company, right? Welfare of the company. And then we have another case here. Let's think about another case. The company wants to raise further capital, right? A company wants to raise further capital. The majority, one of the majority, it holds 98%, right? Almost in complete control of the company, 98%. Only 2% remain to a minor shareholder. So the majority were willing to provide the capital, but provided that you could buy out the remaining 2% from the minority. So you want to change the article, right? In a way that I have the right to buy the remaining 2%. So I will be the one for 100% control of this company. And I will be willing to offer the fund, right? So that's the only way. I have to kick you out, right? You have to leave the company. The minority disagree and the majority propose to change the article, right? To do the same thing. What is the difference between this case and the previous one? So what is the difference between this case and the previous one? For the previous case, the company want to kick out a member for the goodness of the company because that member was a competitor of the company, right? Was an enemy. So that action can be justified for the well-being of the company. But you think about this case, no, right? This guy holding 2% is not an enemy of the company. So this guy want to do this only because of your self-interest, just because you want to control the company 20%. So the court held that the alteration was invalid. The reason is that the alteration was not for the benefit of the company as a whole, but the interest of the majority only, right? So it's for your own interest, not for the company. So always remember, right? Number one, if you want to change the articles, number one, you cannot do anything against the provision of the company ordinance, which is easy, right? No problem, you can understand, very easy, straightforward. But also, you have to do it out of good faith. That will be abstract, right? I can't tell you exactly what you cannot do, but just case by case. Anyway, the underlying principle is that When you're doing something which is for the goodness of the company, that will be fine, right? But if you're doing this for your own goodness, that will be a problem, right? Okay, the last thing before we end the class today. The last thing, because at the very beginning I told you that we have two documents we have to learn on this lecture. Right? Of course, I mean, apart from the company ordinance is the most important one. It governs everything, but because the company ordinance is not something we can change, right? It's not something we can change. So we just learn about it. Because there will be no amendment, right? We cannot make any amendments to the company ordinance. So we have to learn about the articles. Because articles, somehow we can change something. And this, right? Even normally we are not a model article, but at least we can amend part of it. So we have to know about it. Apart from articles, there's another document we also need to learn about. Because I explained to you, I want to ask you some questions first. So think about it. It's not really complicated, right? Another document by comparing with articles. Okay, take a look at an example here. ABC want to settle a conflict, trade second-hand cars. But it doesn't matter for the nature of the business, right? There's three parties. They form a company, they want to do something. The parties worry that they may have dispute in the future, so they hope to first agree on something like the profit-sharing ratio, dividend policy, as well as their own remuneration. Do you think that they should include all of these things in the articles? Well, you know that, right? You have the right to drop anything in the article, at least in theory. So, do you think that you can include all this stuff in the articles? Of course, right? Of course, yes, you can do so. But think about it, is it appropriate? Is it appropriate? Is it appropriate? No, not appropriate. Not appropriate. Why? Number one, think about the status of article. Article is a constitutional document. So it governs, say, like the mechanism of this company, structure of this company, right? For example, for the basic law. So basic law stipulated that there will be a chief executive, there will be a legislative council, there will be executive council, something like this, right? But I don't think that's appropriate for basic law to include, say, like the salary of the chief executive, right? And the financial secretary, the budget for every single year to be stated in basic law. Not appropriate. Because there are things that can change. Right? I'm not saying you cannot do it. You can, but not really appropriate. Do you get my point here, right? Let's say the salary of the chief executive, right? It's quite nonsense. And then think about all this stuff. I'm not saying you cannot do it, but not really appropriate. So if that's not appropriate, then what we can do, but important, right? Important. Think about profit sharing ratio. Why you want to set up a company? You want money, right? You want to make money, right? You're bad guys who want to make money. Only money, right? Nothing more than money. So they're all very important stuff, but not appropriate to be included in the article. Then what you can do, we have another document help to govern the company, not the article, but something we call shareholders agreement, right? Shareholders agreements. We don't give you suit. Well, there's something really important. If you have no experience in the commercial world, to negotiate for a business or to invest in a joint venture project or to form a company, I'm sure that you know this thing. Right? If you never heard about it, I don't know, you are not really experienced in the commercial world, or you heard about it and then you don't understand, and that's normal, right? And that's normal. You pretend to understand, right? It always happens. Right? Okay, it doesn't matter whether you understand or not. I'm going to explain to you what it means. That's very common. For the parties, when they settle a company, they also signed on something we call shareholders agreements. It is a private contract entered into by some of the shareholders on how they exercise their right in managing the company. For example, how to vote. You get my point here, right? It's not article. They sign a separate contract, which is only a private contract between some members or all the members of the company on how they exercise their right. Because as a member, you can do something, right? For example, how to vote on something. And you can sign a contract to promise to the other parties, I vote for something, I always vote for yes on certain topic, something like this. So the shareholders agreement normally include terms not suitable to be stated in the article. It has to achieve certain purpose, not being attainable by using the company's own mechanism. So why we have shareholders agreement? Because there are two reasons. Number one, something not being appropriate to be included in the article. Just not appropriate. You can do so, but not appropriate. Another one, something cannot be achieved by the company's own mechanism. It means that we try to do something, right? All we guys are members here. We try to do something. For example, we always vote for yes, right? We always vote for yes. Regarding changing the name of the company, right? When I propose to change the name of the company, we always vote for yes, right? We want to achieve that. But can we achieve that by relying on the company's own mechanism? No. Because there's nothing in the company ordinance in saying that when someone proposes something, then the other person must say yes. You get my point here, right? That's not something achievable by the company ordinance or the company mechanism. So if we want to achieve that, we have to sign a separate contract, something separate, which is enforceable. And that's why we need to have shareholders agreement, right? Something not achievable by relying on the company mechanism. So I'll give you another example. You can always change the article by 75%, right? We don't have to sign a shareholders agreement on that because you can already achieve it under the company ordinance, right? But you cannot achieve something like, if I want to change the name of the company, then everyone needs to say yes. You cannot achieve that by relying on the company ordinance. There's nothing in the company ordinance to have such a provision. Do you get my point here? So if you want to do something that that's not achievable by the company mechanism, then you have to agree in a separate contract, right? In order to agree with it. All of you agree that if every time propose to change the name of the company, then everyone needs to vote for yes, right? This is separate agreement. So two reasons. Number one, when something is not appropriate to be included in the article. Another one, when something is not possible to be achieved by the company mechanism, right? So this is our agreement, mostly being used by the company only. Why? It's not sensible for this company. So how you ask all the shareholders for this company to sign an agreement? They change by minute, right? 每分鐘都唔同嘅先咩係咪？傻的嗎？ It's not possible, right? So a shareholders agreement can only be signed by a normally private company between 10 members or 20 members, right? And not thousands of members. That's nothing. Okay. So why we need to have what are the advantages in having shareholders agreement? Number one, privacy, right? Privacy. Why privacy is a concern? Because article is a public document. So anything stated in the article will be learned by the outside world. So if you state the profit sharing ratio in the article, well, you can do so. I'm not saying you cannot. Yes, you can do so. But that's nonsense. Because everyone will learn about the operation of your company, right? Including your competitors. So I don't think that you want your competitors to understand the operation of your company regarding the profit sharing or the dividend ratio, right? Or the dividend policy. With their business decision, you don't want to make it public. But if you say in the article, that will be public, right? So if you have a private agreement, shareholder agreement, you can keep it confidential because there's only a private contract. You don't have to show it to the outside world, right? And you can also ask all the parties who sign on it to keep it confidential. Right? You can include a provision saying that this contract is confidential. You cannot disclose to the outside parties. Otherwise, you breach a contract, right? So you can keep the confidentiality. Number two, amendments. Shareholder agreement being a private agreement can be amended easily by mutual consent and having few restrictions than the article as a constitutional and a statutory contract. If you want to change the article, do remember that it is something statutory, right? So the law stated some principle here. You just learned that. Number one, you cannot against the company ordinance. Another one, it must be for the good faith of the company, right? And you need to achieve 75% in order to change the article. But how about a public contract? Nothing. When you agree on it, you can do anything you like. Right? You just agree on it, that will be fine. But of course, you need to have 100% agreement. Right? So except for that, nothing, right? Nothing. Because there's only one principle in contract law, and you cannot have a contract which is illegal, and that's all, right? You can appeal on anything you like, but if you want to change the article, there are lots of restrictions, common law restrictions, company law restrictions, right? So amendment, it means like it will be easier, right? Easier. This one, probably is the most important one, right? Probably is the most important one. Minority protection. A shareholders agreement in a public contract can only be amended by unanimous consent. So give the minority de facto veto power. If they should not enjoy merely through the corporate structure. If I'm the minority, if I only hold 25%, then what happens? Then what happens? I will be manipulated. 俾人玩，任人魚肉，冇收入。Why? Because based on the law, the company ordinance, when you achieve 75%, you can change article. You change article means you change the rule of the game. And as a minority, no matter how hard I try to oppose in a meeting, 我每次都舉手 say no， 我舉埋腳，擘開個人，伸開晒手，即係話如果你嘅 25%， the result will be you will always be defeated, right? Nothing. You can do nothing. It means that you cannot prevent the majority to change the rule regarding the management of the company because you hold 25 or less than 25%, right? If you hold 26%, you can block that resolution. But if you hold 25 or less than 25, you will always be the loser in a voting, right? So nothing you can do. But then think about a shareholders agreement. How to change the shareholders agreement? It's a contract. If you want to change contract, what do you need? 100% consent. So that's not achievable by the company mechanism. Is it correct? Right. Because based on the company mechanism, if you hold 75%, you can change the article. But if we sign a private agreement saying that, right? Saying that here's the major shareholder, he holds 75%, and there are other shareholders, so you hold 5%, 5%, 5%. So if you rely on the company mechanism, he's the one, right? He's the big brother always, because he holds 75%. But if we all of us, all the different parties sign separate shareholders agreements in saying that when you want to change the article, you need to have everyone consent. Then it means that, right, even I hold only 5% of share in this company, I can stop this decision by relying on the shareholders agreement. And that's not achievable by using the company mechanism. Do you get my point here? All right? So shareholders agreement is something really important, especially for minority protection. Especially if you're a minority. If you're a majority, probably you don't have any concern of it, right? Because you're the big brother. But if you're a minority, think about it. Because you can not change my shareholders agreement because based on the contract, if you want to change a contract, that's not based on how many shares you hold. You need to have every head count here to agree on changing the contract, right? So if you sign a separate contract saying that you must have my agreement before you change the article, saying means that as a minority, I can also enjoy protection. Something not achievable under the company law, something not achievable under the company ordinance, and under the company mechanism, right? So that's very important. Number 3, last one. Some business objectives are very important to the party, so you should not make it open. I already explained to you, right? Some business information that should not be included in the articles, right? Because you make it public, right? And that's no good. But there are limitations regarding the shareholders agreement, right? There are limitations. Well, it always happens, right? So once you learn something, and then you learn about exception. A shareholders agreement is valid generally. Even he's the big brother, right? He's the big brother, but if he agreed in the shareholders agreement, he never changed the share. He never changed the article, right? So if he tried to change the article, I can sue him based on our shareholders agreement, which is another contract. Okay, that's good, right? So it works. But there are limitations. Number one, unlike the article, it's not binding to all the members. Remember that, right? Remember that. A shareholders agreement, it only works for those who sign on it. But the article in the constitution of the company governs every single member, right? You don't need to have their agreement. If you are a member, you will not mind, right? But for shareholders agreement, you have to make sure that guy willing to sign on it, willing to sign on that agreement, right? Number one. Number two, this one is a little bit complicated. It cannot affect the statutory authority of the company. If the company itself is also a party in the shareholders agreement, that's a little bit tricky stuff here. I use the same example again. To change the article, right? To change the article. So sometime when we conclude shareholders agreements, that agreement not just being signed by the different members, but the company also signed on it. That's possible. Do you remember the Songwriting Principle, right? You can sign a contract with the company. So sometimes the shareholders agreement not just being concluded by the different share. For example, there are 4 members of this company, right? Not just between the 4 members, but also the company. I insist on it. Right? Why I try to do this? If that's shareholders agreement only signed by the different members, if this guy try to do something bad, right? You are not following the shareholders agreement to seek for my approval first before you change the articles, right? Then I can sue you, right? I can sue you. Then probably you have to pay compensation. But if the company also signed on the shareholders agreement, right? If the company also signed on it, so a company is a separate party. So it means the company also violated the shareholders agreement, right? Because the shareholders agreement saying that he cannot change article. Now you change, right? A company is also a legal person, remember. So I can also sue the company. So it's giving better protection to the minority, right? So sometimes the company will also be included in the shareholders agreement, right? But it creates a problem. It creates a problem. Why? Because if you sign on, if you ask the company to sign on shareholders agreements, and if you try to restrict the right of the company, if you try to restrict the statutory right of the company, then that thing may not work, right? May not be effective. I show you a case here. It's a very famous case regarding the validity of shareholders agreements. So Russell versus London Bank. What happened here? The members signed a shareholders agreement, right? A short form SA, and agreed that federal capital shall only be issued if unanimous consent of the shareholders can be obtained, right? They signed a shareholders agreement in saying that if you want to issue more shares, then you need to have approval for all the members, right? So that's what being agreed in the shareholders agreement. So the board proposed to increase share capital. One dissenting member tried to restrain the other members and the company to follow the agreement, right? Because, come on, you signed a shareholder agreement. You promised that when you want to issue share capital, you need to have consent of everyone. Now I disagree, right? So you cannot do it. But the company still tried to pass a resolution. Why? Because, right? Because the law states that if a company wants to issue more share capital, the law states that the company only needs to pass a resolution for 50%, right? 50%. For example, there are 4 shareholders, right? If each of us holding 25, suppose. So all of you guys agreed to issue share capital. You get 75%. So you can pass a resolution, right? To issue more share capital. I disagree, right? I disagree. But I only hold 25%. So I try to rely on the shareholder agreement. Because all you guys agreed, right? All you guys agreed that if you want to issue more share capital, you also need my consent, right? You need to have unanimous consent, means everyone. So you violated the shareholder agreement. I want to stop you, right? I want to stop you, right? So that's what happened. But take a look at the ruling from the court. The court held that the parties were bound by the agreement as a contract. So they should exercise their right to vote based on the shareholder agreement, right? So all you guys, you should follow the shareholders agreement. However, this kind of restriction is not enforceable against a company. A company cannot enter the contract which may restrict the statutory authority of the company itself. This party actually being cited by you, and me, 4 parties, and also the company, right? This is the company here, right? This is the company here. Right. So 4 members and this company signed on this contract, shareholders agreement. so including this company. But the court held that the restriction to this company is not valid. Because the law states that, right? Company law states that a company can issue shares if a resolution for 50% can be passed. So this contract is not binding to the company, but binding to everyone here. Okay, you might want to ask a question, then what is the difference? Right. You have to understand the different legal consequences here. It means that the company can still issue additional shares. I cannot stop it because it is not valid, even stated in the shareholder agreement. Because it is law. The law states that when the company can pass a resolution with 50%, because there are 75% here, right? When the company can pass a resolution with 50%, then the company can issue shares. I cannot stop it because it is against company law. Right? So I cannot stop it. The company will issue additional shares. But this contract is binding to all these guys. So I can sue them for breach of contract, for compensation, but I cannot stop them to pass this resolution. You get my point? Right? So that's why I'm saying that the shareholders agreement is it works, right? It's binding, especially if you are a minority. It works. But just remember, there are limitations, right? There are limitations. Well, especially if the company is also a party in this contract, because the company cannot do anything against the company ordinance. So maybe you cannot achieve the purpose, the original purpose of your shareholder agreement, but it still gives you protection. Because I can sue you guys for compensation, then you put it in, right? But I cannot stop the company to issue more shares. And that is the limitation of shareholders agreement. All right? Okay, so that's all for today. See you next week, right? See you next week. If there are any problems, you can talk to me.
簡單嘅問題。